Mr. Secretary, as the leader of the U.S. Department that has approved the transfer of the vast majority of the Israeli bombs dropped in this conflict, do events like the bombing of the World Central Kitchen convoy give you pause about continuing the flood of U.S. weapons into Israel? And a second question for both of you, Secretary Blinken and Minister Sejourné. There has been a rise of Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil refineries. The West is fairly united in saying these strikes are justified. Do you think hitting these facilities is the right strategic approach for Ukraine?
Please.
Thank you, John. Let me take the second question first. It has been our view and policy from day one when it comes to Ukraine to do everything we possibly can to help Ukraine defend itself against this Russian aggression. At the same time, we have neither supported nor enabled strikes by Ukraine outside of its territory. With regard to arm transfers, look, I think it's very important to put this in its proper perspective and to understand what we're talking about. First, we have a long-standing commitment to Israel's security and to helping ensure its ability to defend itself. That's been a policy from administration to administration, Republican, Democrat, back and forth. And indeed, that policy developed over many years, developed into successive agreements between the United States and Israel, long-duration agreements, 10 years in this case, to provide military assistance over that time frame to about $3 billion a year. That's the system that's in place, and it's long been in place. These arms transfers, every single one, happens consistent with statutory and policy requirements. That includes both informal and formal notifications to Congress, and it's what we do with every country with whom we have a defense relationship that involves the sale or transfer of arms. Now, the other important piece of context is this. With Israel, and this is also true with other countries, there are a number of open cases, open requests of previously notified cases which have not been fully fulfilled or completed. In the case of Israel, for example, there are many requests that were made and were notified to Congress and agreed to that go back a decade or more. And it takes time often to produce the material or the weapons in question, the parts, etc. These complex systems, simply put, can take years to actually allow us to fulfill the request and the agreement. So many of the cases that you occasionally report on now underwent congressional review years ago and were notified years ago, well before the conflict in Gaza started.
Isn't that more of a problem, though, because they were approved in a non-wartime context? Well, Congress never had a chance.
Let me come to that because, again, all of this context is very, very important. We, of course, also go out of our way to make sure that we're actually going above and beyond the law and what's required in briefing Congress. We go to the relevant oversight committees. We make sure that they're aware of ongoing transfers above the statutory threshold, even ones that they've approved a long time ago. And even when there's no requirement that there be additional notice or additional approval of any kind. Now, we've been focused on trying to make sure that October 7th can never happen again. But having said that, the security relationship we have with Israel is not just about Gaza, Hamas, October 7th. It's also about the threats posed to Israel by Hezbollah, by Iran, by various other actors in the region, each one of which has vowed, one way or another, to try to destroy Israel. So the weapons, the systems that Israel has sought to acquire, and as I said, have been contracted in many cases over many, many years, go to self-defense. They go to deterrence, trying to avoid more conflicts. They go to replenishment of their supplies and their stocks. So that's the system that's in place, has been in place for a long time, and one that continues. Now, as to the conflict in Gaza, from day one, we have worked to impress upon Israel the imperative of protecting civilians, of adhering fully to international humanitarian law, to the law of armed conflict. That is something that we are looking at and review on a regular basis, and that we're engaged with Israel on a regular basis, including as recently as yesterday when we met by video with the Israeli delegation.